Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Invaluable Grace. I was one way and now I'm different. This week I would like to speak about slavery. Hey, what an interesting word. Considering that it's mentioned in the Bible quite a bit. It's mentioned as a way of life, right? It's mentioned as a experience or a posture, by disciples, by Jesus himself, so there's such an interesting way that the Bible portrays slavery, which is not seen in today's day and age. Because for us, slavery, when we hear of that word, we think of bondage, we think of, restriction. We are held against our will, and we have no rights and no say, right? It has such a negative connotation to it. But then ask yourself this: why would the Bible emphasize it in the manner that it is, or even mention it in the way that it has been mentioned? So I went digging because I need to know. I have to know. And I was very intrigued, right? And quite pleasantly surprised where this led me to. Like I said before, for me, the motivation is to truly understand the Word of God, and not in the way that we've been led to understand it, not at just the top, but deeper and more, intentionally, because God doesn't mince words. God doesn't just speak for no reason. There is so much depth to his word. There is so much meaning to his word that you really need to research, study, pray, invite the Holy Spirit to give you the revelations that you need to fully understand certain things, because it will confuse us and we will misinterpret it and take it out of context. And that is really just where these videos have been going for the last couple of weeks. Just deeper understanding of words, of verses, of, certain statements that were made, just so we can understand God intimately and really apply what we're understanding. It's all good and well to say you understand but you're not applying it. That just means you don't understand, right? And this is really what I want to emphasize with these videos. So what was so crazy is this word I took from the book of Malachi, right? And I don't really read, or I don't like to, let me say, I don't like to read the Old Testament because, like, I'm sure for a lot of us, it's very confusing, right? And there's a whole lot of laws and, prophets, and the Israelites are just so stubborn. So the New Testament is nice, it's like a play-by-play. You understand this happened, and thereafter all of these things are happening. It really just speaks to us as the church right now. So I wanted to really kind of understand the Old Testament, and I was led to Malachi, and this is the verse that I found the word slavery. And it's not something that is like emphasized or loud in the scripture, but that's what I took away from it, and we're going to talk about where it led me, right? So let's read Malachi chapter 3, verse 13 to 18. It's quite long, so just stick it out. Stay with me. God says, "You have spoken hard, rude words to me." You ask, "When did we ever do that?" When you said it doesn't pay to serve God, what do we ever get out of it? When we did what he said and went around with long faces, serious about God of the angel of armies, what difference did it make? Those who take life into their own hands are the lucky ones. They break all the rules and get ahead anyway. They push God to the limit and get by with it. Then those whose lives honored God together and talked it over, God saw what they were doing and listened in. A book was opened in God's presence, and minutes were taken of the meeting, with the names of the God-fearers written down, all the names of those who honored God's name. God of the angels' army said, "They are mine, all mine. They'll get special treatment when I go into action. I treat them with the same consideration and kindness that parents give their child who honors them." Once more, you will see the difference it makes between being a person who does the right thing and the one who doesn't, between serving God and not serving him. Okay, so hectic, right? And this is the Message version, mind you, hence the length of it. But I like that version very much because I think it really just gives depth to the verse, or verses rather. So I'm sure you're wondering, where did you find the word slavery, right? And it's in actually the word servitude that I ended up with slavery or slave. So I was trying to figure out, okay, what is the true meaning of servitude? Because we hear it spoken so often. And I mean, Jesus himself said, I came to serve and not to be served. And God expects us to be servants, with our skills and our gifts, and our everything. We are just called as Christians to serve one another, right? And it cannot just mean giving off of ourselves, or like a waiter. For me, that's literally what I have in mind. A waiter gives you things that you want, right? There surely is more to servitude than just giving other people what you already possess. There must be more, and that's where I was led to the word slave, or slavery rather, right? So the word servitude, there's a lot of translations to it, but this is the one that really stood out for me, and I wanted to stay here. And the Greek word for servitude is actually doulos, I think. And translation means slave, right? So someone who is compelled to work for another person, but this person has legal ownership of this person, right? So it's not underhanded, it's not illegal. They are compelled to work because they have been bought legally to work under that person. What's interesting here is that back in biblical times, historical times, slavery was a thing, not necessarily in the way that robs people of their rights, and victimizes people and abuses them. Remember, sin is evident in this world, and everything that God creates is tainted by it, right? So slavery was not necessarily a bad thing, right? And even the term slavery is tarnished because of what people have done with it. Like anything in life, once anything is abused or is done away from God, away from God's principles and statutes, it will be tarnished, it will be tainted, it will destroy instead of build, right? So slavery back in the time was actually a good thing, because there were people who couldn't fend for themselves, who couldn't, for many different reasons, right? They were the privileged and they were the less privileged, similar to what we see now in life, right? They are the haves and the have-nots. There are those who can afford and those who can't, right? That is just the way of life. Jesus himself even said, there will always be the poor among us. We cannot change that. Also a byproduct of sin, right? Slavery was created as a way of employment, number one, as a way of those who have extending their riches to other people, bringing them in their employ, bringing them into their household, but they had mastery over these people, right? So people couldn't just come in the employ and just do whatever they wanted. There was an order, right? There was a hierarchy, right? Just like everything in life, just like God himself, there is always order and structure in the things of God. And the same is said for slavery too. So once a master would buy or own a slave, they were immediately under their possession. They were cared for by them. They were fed for by them. They were provided, for they had everything that they need, because it was the master's onus. It was the master's responsibility to take care of those he bought, of those he owned, for lack of a better word, right? Not abuse, not mistreat, not objectify, but just treat them as part of their home. But they had ownership over those people. It wasn't made to undignify people. It was just the structure and the order of the time, right? So if I belonged to a household and I was bought by the master, then I had to obey this master. I had to trust him, to basically take care of my life, right down to marriage. The master had responsibility over slaves, who they got married to. They would arrange all of those things, how they were educated, if they educated them, if they taught them how to read. Most of them didn't know how to read, and it was the master's responsibility to kind of groom and rear and take care of their slave. Right? And at the same time, the slave was responsible for whatever duties or responsibilities the master gave the slave, whether it was tending the house or, watching over the animals, cooking, whatever the case may be. They were basically housed, but they also had responsibility. They were taken care of, but they also had to do their part. The master had full ownership over them and their lives, and responsibility on how to make sure that they are effective and they are well taken care of, but they also had to do their part, right? So this is where the terms slave and master came into play, particularly in a historical connotation. Now let's take it back a bit, right? And think of us as creation, particularly us as human beings, right? God created us to have dominion over the earth. Essentially, he gave us the authority over everything on earth, right? But, and here is the but, that dominion and authority was always meant to be in partnership with God, right? So yes, we had the right to make choices and, to rule and to go on and make decisions, but it was always in partnership with our maker, with our creator, with our master, right? We couldn't do it outside of that partnership. We can't do it outside of that, governance and guide and rearing and teaching, right? And this is what is very important, because we were created, yes, with that dominion, but that dominion was always meant to be in partnership with the maker. Fast forward to the garden, where we took that authority, right, and we gave it over to somebody else. We gave it over to the enemy, because he presented us with an option, right? Mind you, that option was veiled slavery, right? Or rather, veiled bondage, and we were not aware of it. Remember, we are presented with two different types of slavery here. We are presented with the slavery where we need to be groomed, we need to be guided and reared by the master who has bought us, right? Legally, legal ownership, right? Then we've also got the slavery that holds us hostage, which we see enacted today. The slavery of, apartheid, the slavery of oppression and, genocide and killing and human trafficking. That type of slavery is the slavery that the enemy also emphasizes as well. And it's very interesting how these two versions of slavery are contrasted to each other, because you need to understand we were made to be dependent on something and someone. God created us with that blueprint within us, right? So it goes without saying that if something else presents an option to enslave us, we will be enslaved by that. If we're not enslaved by one thing, we are enslaved by another thing. That is the way that God made us. And in his makeup, it was always to keep us attached to him, to keep us, submitted to him, to keep us in line and in sync with him, right? But because the choice that we made separated that connection with God, we are now made privy to the other type of bondage, the other type of slavery, which is not legal, which is bound, which is bondage, which is, chains, right? It doesn't afford us the freedom that a legal slave would have. So slavery in retrospect requires an allegiance. It requires an allegiance. Because of the choice God gave us, we cannot be forced or coerced into certain bondage or into certain choices or into certain experiences, right? There needs to be some level of agreement that we walk into. And this is where we need to ascertain which slave, which master are we giving our lives over to? Which master are we submitting to? Because everything is trying to own us, and not legally. Everything is trying to own us, whether it is what we watch, what we listen to, what we hear, the things that we are, averse to, is trying to control us. We are all created in a slave model, but it's not meant to keep us bound. It is meant to actually have us live in freedom. Because when you have a master who provides for you, there's no need for you to go looking for provision elsewhere. When you have a master who protects you, who teaches you, who molds you, who corrects you, who grooms you, right? Who knows where you need to go in life, who ordains your purpose and your calling. There's no need for you to look for it anywhere else, right? But now, which master have we given ourselves to? Which master have we given our allegiance to? Because the path of life determines which master is. Either way, something or somebody needs to have ownership over us. We were created that way because we need to understand that we cannot be lone rangers. We cannot make decisions in our own capacity. We don't have the ability to ascertain what is right, what is wrong, right? We fail to fully have autonomous ownership over ourselves because it is detrimental to us. God, yes, has given us choice, but he's given us the ability to choose with his reference in mind, with his guideline in mind. So when he gives us options, he's hoping that we will choose correctly. God is always emphasizing, servitude and submission, and obedience, because it's in a slave's mindset that they understand that I need to obey my master. I need to be obedient to him. I need to follow authority. I need to give off of myself. I need to follow the rules, essentially. Because when a master sees that a slave is, contributing and is obedient, he rewards that slave, right? He rewards that slave. And the same is said with us as well in our walk and our journey with God. That is why he's always emphasizing about authority, and obedience, because we need to obey to him more than anything. We need to be submitted to him. Jesus came to show us an example of what it means to be a slave, not only to your gifting, to your calling, to your purpose, right? But to be obedient to God, obedient to the Father. All he kept referencing was, I came to do the will of my Father. I came to do what my Father wills me to do. He would always invite him in. He would always consult God. He would go away even to, choose the disciples, right? It's something that he fully understood, that there was an authority, there was somebody above him that he needed to be subject to. Not because God is trying to control us or to contain us, but it's because it's in that submission and that acknowledgement and that surrender that life actually turns out the way it was meant to be all along, right? Life actually turns out in our favor when we submit to the master, to the maker. All Paul emphasizes on, as well as on his journey, to discipleship, is he's a slave to Christ. He's a slave to his call. He's a slave to his gifting, right? He has fully given himself over to his master willingly, because God, Jesus, paid the ultimate price, right? Remember I made reference to how a master pays for a slave? Well, in this regard, this master paid the price through his body, through his, death, through his blood. He paid for us. He paid so that we could be submitted to his will, submitted to his way of doing life, not our way. Submit and surrender to him. God calls us to serve, one another, to serve him, right? And again, translate, we are called to be slaves to one another, to be slaves to him, not in a negative connotation, but in the way that God initially created it. We are slaves in the sense that we are, children to the master, to the father, to the parent, to the leader. We are governed in his protection, in his love, in his light. And we need to be willing participants of that, because when we resist it, we open ourselves up to the other version of slavery, and that is the one that God is always trying to save us from every single time. But we resist that, right? Because we think we are in control when something is actually controlling us. And yeah, that was where I was led to with the word slave, essentially servitude, but slave really is the original text for the word servitude, and it really just made me look at my walk with God differently. I am his slave, he is my master, and everything I do because he is making me better. He provides all that I need. He equips me for my purpose. He, guides my path. He knows who I'm going to meet, who I'm going to marry. All of those things he has planned out, because he bought me with his life. He purchased me, right? And he is invested in ensuring that my life is the best possible version it could possibly be, because I am a willing participant to his mastery, and I have sworn allegiance to him. And because of that allegiance, he gets to be master over my life. And I would never change that decision, ever. It literally is the best choice that I've ever made. And I urge you all to please be conscious of what it is you are submitting to, because believe me, you may think you are not, but you are submitted to a master. But for your sake, I pray that you choose the right one. Your life depends on it. The success of life depends on it. All right. I hope this message blessed you guys, and I will catch you on the next episode. Bye, guys.